Today, we're diving into one of the most disturbing chapters in American history. We're talking about a top-secret CIA program, a real one, that was designed to do one thing: control the human mind. It was called Project MK Ultra. Just let that sink in for a second. That's a quote from the daughter of a man who was subjected to these experiments. And it really cuts right to the heart of this story. This isn't just about spies and secret files. It's about the real, devastating human cost of a war fought inside people's own heads. So let's start right there, with the people whose lives were just shattered. Because before we get into the what of the program, we really need to understand the why. Why this whole thing is still so chilling, decades later. When you hear the stories from the families, you hear the same tragic things over and over again. People would go in for treatment for something minor, and they'd come out completely different. Their own families describe them as zombies, with this blank look in their eyes, sometimes unable to even recognize their own kids. Productive lives just collapsed into poverty. Loving parents suddenly became violent. And for decades, most of these families had no idea what happened. They just suffered, in silence, carrying this trauma they couldn't even name. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of program could do that to a person? What was its purpose, and who was behind it? Well, the answer lies hidden behind the curtain of the Cold War. And that brings us to the program itself, Project MK Ultra. Now, this wasn't some rogue operation. This was an officially sanctioned project born out of the intense paranoia of the Cold War, this deep-seated fear of Soviet and Chinese brainwashing. You know, MK Ultra didn't just appear out of thin air. It was really an evolution. The work actually started way back with the OSS during World War II. Then, when the CIA was formed, they kept it going under these creepy-sounding names like Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke. By 1953, all those efforts were consolidated and, well, supercharged into what we now know as Project MK Ultra. So what was it officially? According to the U.S. Senate investigation that eventually exposed it, its goal was both simple and absolutely terrifying: to find ways to alter and control human behavior. And they were willing to use a huge array of methods to do it, everything from drugs and hypnosis to straight-up psychological abuse. And just to be crystal clear, this is not a conspiracy theory. What you're looking at is the cover of the actual 1977 Senate hearing that blew the lid off the entire operation. This document, right here, is what stamps the program's existence into the public record. It moves it out of the shadows and into documented, undeniable history. And the scale of this thing, it was staggering. We are talking about more than 80 different institutions, universities, hospitals, even prisons that were used to conduct this research. And get this, in many cases, these respected institutions had no idea the CIA was secretly footing the bill. But to really understand just how sinister this was, we've got to look at what they were actually trying to do. What were the specific goals? This is basically the CIA's mind control wish list. They wanted drugs and methods that could make people irrational and impulsive. Things that could induce amnesia or create shock and confusion that lasted for days. They even researched ways to cause physical paralysis or just to lower a person's ambition and make them less efficient. It reads like a checklist for how to systematically deconstruct a human being. And just so you know, those points weren't made up for a movie. This is a declassified CIA memo from 1955 that lists the exact effects they were searching for. The proof of their intentions is right there, in their own words. It's chilling. So how on earth did they justify this? Well, the official story, the one they told people, was defensive. They said, hey, we need to understand brainwashing to protect our own agents. But internal documents tell a very different story. They reveal a much more offensive goal. One memo actually said the U.S. was forced to assume a more aggressive role in developing these exact same techniques for its own secret operations. For 20 years, this was all happening in the dark. And honestly, it almost stayed there. Because in the 1970s, the CIA tried to erase MK Ultra from history. Completely. In 1973, the CIA director at the time, Richard Helms, gave a simple verbal order: destroy all records related to the program. It was a clear, deliberate attempt to make sure the agency's darkest secrets would never, ever see the light of day. The Senate committee that eventually investigated the program put it perfectly. They said the CIA violated the public's trust twice. First, by even conducting these horrific experiments, and second, by trying to cover them all up. So if they destroyed everything, how do we even know about any of this? Well, it came down to pure dumb luck. Amidst all the shredding and burning, a clerk had accidentally misfiled just 7 boxes of financial records. 7. That is all that survived. And this right here, this is the letter that blew the whole thing open. It's from the CIA director in 1977, telling the Senate that these 7 boxes had just been found. Those financial records, which detailed payments to doctors and hospitals, were the single thread that allowed investigators to start unraveling the entire vast program. Now, the discovery of those documents led to public hearings and big headlines, but it really didn't lead to closure. The shadow of MKUltra still hangs over us today, and it's left behind this profound, deep legacy of mistrust. Think about this. To this day, the U.S. government has never formally apologized to the victims or their families. Not once. No compensation was ever offered. And now, decades later, it's the children of those who were experimented on who are still in court, still fighting for some tiny measure of justice. This might all feel like something out of a Cold War spy novel, right? Dark, but ancient history. But it brings up a really unsettling modern question. The CIA was limited by the tech of the 1950s. What could be achieved today? Well, the answer, according to a recent analysis from Harvard, is pretty chilling. Researchers there concluded that modern technologies, like brain-computer interfaces, could absolutely be used to achieve some of MKUltra's original goals, and that the interest in mind control still prevails.
And that really leaves us with a final, sobering thought. The entire story of MKUltra was exposed because of 7 misfiled boxes. It just makes you wonder what other secrets were successfully destroyed. And what does this whole story really teach us about the ongoing battle between national security and the absolute right to control your own mind?